So have you ever lived next to a neighbor who treats the shared hallway like it's their personal storage unit? It's just infuriating,
Oh, yeah, definitely.
right? So today's deep dive is into this strategic guide on pro indiviso, or basically co-ownership. And our mission here is to figure out how to resolve these really intense neighbor conflicts in buildings that completely lack a formal condominium regime.
Yeah, we are looking specifically at Mexico City here. Thousands of apartments operate in this legally ambiguous gray zone.
Exactly. And it feels like the Wild West of real estate, honestly. People assume that without formal condo papers or like an official administrator in a suit to issue fines, it's just a free-for-all where anyone can do whatever they want.
Well, actually, that idea of juridical informality is a massive misconception.
Wait, really?
Yeah, I mean, just because a building doesn't have a shiny, notarized condo declaration doesn't mean it exists outside the law. But because residents believe they're in a legal vacuum, you see this intense clash between unchecked selfish behavior and what the legal code actually dictates.
Right. And because there is no official building manager to enforce the rules, the rest of the residents just feel totally paralyzed. The guide points out three main ways this chaos manifests.
Like the water hoarding.
Yeah, water hoarding, and then abusing common areas with private security cameras or pets, and flat out refusing to chip in for urgent maintenance,
Yeah.
like fixing sinkholes or clearing pipes.
The water hoarding is particularly fascinating, though. In these buildings, it is super common for a resident to unilaterally install a private water tank on the shared roof just to ensure their own apartment never runs dry.
I will admit my first instinct reading that was to think, well, isn't that just being proactive? I mean, if the city water pressure is unreliable, taking matters into your own hands seems, logical, right?
It seems logical until you look at the fluid dynamics of the building. When someone tacks a private tank and pump into a shared system, they physically alter the common hydraulic network.
Oh, I see.
Think of the building plumbing like a cardiovascular system. Installing a private pump creates this massive pressure vacuum. It essentially starves the rest of the building's organs to feed one specific area.
Wow. So by securing their own supply, they're literally siphoning pressure away from the person downstairs.
Exactly. It fundamentally violates the human right to water and proportional use. And going back to the maintenance issue, if that same neighbor refuses to pay to fix a crumbling shared wall,
The entire building is left holding the bag if that wall eventually collapses on a pedestrian.
which creates massive civil liability for everyone. This is where that paralysis you mentioned earlier kicks in. Neighbors think, well, we don't have a condo board, so we can't force them to pay or remove the water tank.
But the guide reveals a major legal workaround here. It's the Mexico City Civil Code's rules on pro indiviso.
Right, pro indiviso meaning the state of undivided co-ownership. So even without a formal condo regime, the law recognizes they collectively own the physical structure.
Okay, so the Civil Code outlines specific mechanics for this. Article 951 dictates that foundational elements like roofs, structural walls, pipes are legally indivisible.
Correct. You cannot claim exclusive ownership of a shared artery.
So it's basically that we're all in the same boat clause.
Exactly. And following that, Article 945 prohibits altering those shared pipes or facades without unanimous consent.
Which makes sense mechanically. You can't just splice a new pipe into the main line without affecting the pressure for the entire structure.
Yeah.
But there is an obvious catch here, right?
The rogue neighbor.
Yeah, if you need unanimous consent to alter things, the rogue neighbor with the private water tank is obviously going to vote no on removing it.
Which brings us to the failsafe, Article 946. This gives the majority of the co-owners the power to mandate administrative rules over a dissenting minority.
Ah, so 946 is the one person can't sink the boat clause.
That is a great way to put it. The legal mechanism of co-ownership doesn't require a formal condo structure to enforce rules. It relies purely on majority consensus.
But practically speaking, nobody wants to spend years tied up in civil court suing the guy in apartment 4B.
Right, and that is why the guide emphasizes an extrajudicial strategy. The first step is to formalize a de facto assembly. The neighbors basically convene and draft a self-regulation agreement.
But how do you stop the endless arguing over who actually caused the water pressure drop?
You deploy technical audits. You hire an independent engineer or a plumber to map the system and definitively prove the private tank is causing the damage.
Oh, that's smart. It removes the emotion and just presents the physical data.
Exactly. And once the majority has that proof, they can implement proportional billing.
So if the audit shows your private pump is pulling 20% more electricity from the shared grid, you pay a proportionally higher cut of the bill.
Right. The beauty of this is that it reestablishes order without needing the bureaucratic machinery of a formal board. The law simply recognizes that your rights end exactly where your neighbor's water shortage begins.
It completely flips the script. We started out thinking these residents were helpless without a formal administrator in a suit and tie.
But it turns out the law never required that administrator. It just requires the coordinated will of the majority.
It is a stark reminder that private property is never absolute when it collides with collective well-being.
Yeah, when people realize they hold the legal authority simply by virtue of co-ownership, that supposed informality actually becomes a very agile form of self-governance.
Absolutely. And it leaves you with this to mull over. If a single apartment building can successfully self-govern using just mutual accountability, technical audits, and basic civil codes.
Could this model of de facto community regulation be the secret to solving much larger systemic crises?
Exactly. Just imagine neighbors applying this exact same framework of proportional responsibility to local climate resilience or crumbling city infrastructure. The power might just be in our hands already.